Welcome to the Aron Bender podcast. On this episode, Feven Kay.
I know. I've been really good about not crying about this, but you get it. Real people get it.
Once you started talking about, you wake up and you're so angry with God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That one got me. That one.
Yeah.
That's the one. Everyone has a story. I get them to tell it. Welcome to the Aron Bender podcast. Conversations with media personalities about their personal and professional lives and journeys. Before we get to my conversation with Feven Kay, a little about my story. I'm a widowed husband of two girls who just lost their mom. A grieving husband, a man in recovery trying to reconnect with the world with fresh eyes, faith, and perspective. A college journalism professor, a white guy in a world of injustice. A 20-year broadcast media veteran who had his dream job and then lost it. Nearly 2 years ago, God gave me a gift, an opportunity to stop, step back, and breathe so I can learn about love, vulnerability, patience, self-care, and understanding. Feven Kay is a morning news anchor in Las Vegas who earlier this year went from reporting stories to being the story. We talk about growing up in Oakland and Bakersfield, the evolution of her conversations with God, and how her faith helped get her through the most difficult and very public time in her life. I will say that I promise my viewers and listeners that I am not going on this run of just all Cal State Northridge people. We just had Casey Montoya on.
Yay, that's my girl.
But I promise it's not going to be. It could be an all CSUN podcast. We've got so many people out there. But thank you very much for coming on to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Now, born in Africa,
yes,
but moved to the United States. At what age was that? And, judging by that, how much do you remember about East Africa?
Not much. I was 6 months old when we came to America. So I was a baby. So I like to I'm pretty Americanized. I'm probably one of the few people in my family that doesn't have the accent, and sometimes I get upset about that because I would like that accent.
That'd be nice. Yeah. Now, do you slip into it at all when you're with family? I mean, you kind of pick it up, sympathetic accent at all?
I don't have the accent, but I definitely speak our native language when I'm with my family.
What is the native language?
So my mom's Eritrean. It is Tigrinya, and my dad's Ethiopian, and it's Amharinya.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I like 3 of those 4 things I've never even heard of.
Most people haven't, so it's okay.
All right. Feven says it's okay. It's fine. Okay.
It is. And you know what? Like, I'm the oldest of 3, and my brother and sister who were born here in the States, they can understand it, but they don't speak it. So
why the move to the US?
I mean, obviously, especially East Africa, it's not the richest country. There's just way more opportunities. So I think for most Africans, the dream is to come to America, give kids better education and just a better shot at the American dream.
Now, the idea, though, that so many people have that dream, but they don't always have the means or the opportunity to actually get to the U.S. What were your parents doing, and how did they handle that? And you're the oldest, so
I will say it was a lot easier then than it is now. Around that time, there were so many of our relatives. If you had a sponsor here in the U.S., then that pretty much wasn't the only requirement, but it was a lot easier. In turn, my parents have sponsored dozens and dozens of relatives to be able to do the same thing.
Where in California did you guys settle?
Oakland.
Okay.
So there's a very big East African community in the Bay Area. So we started
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. So Oakland, Los Angeles, Minnesota, Seattle, there's these hubs, Dallas, DC, where you'll find a very large group of East Africans.
All right. You've got to pick one place. It's either the Bay or LA.
The Bay.
Always the Bay.
Yeah. Yes. Always the Bay.
What is it about that rivalry, that Bay Area LA rivalry? Because you've lived in both regions. Yes. What is it about that rivalry that just gets people?
I'm not sure, because we moved to Bakersfield when I was 10. So I've kind of lived throughout the entire state of California. Yeah. So I don't discriminate on either. I think for me, it's just a lot of my family is in the Bay Area, and it's very chill in the Bay Area. If you've been to Berkeley, I love Berkeley. It's so much arts involved in that area. So, and I think some people tend to think that LA is a little too Hollywood. A little,
Is there truth
I
to
love LA, so I don't want to give LA a hard time. I am a matador.
I was going to say LA helped make you.
Yes.
So let's not. Is there truth to the idea that the Bay Area and San Francisco especially, but the Bay Area, they care more about LA than LA does about NorCal?
I think so, because I've never really heard, my friends in LA have anything negative to say about NorCal, but I do have Bay Area friends that don't have the nicest things to say.
I know. What is it? What is it? Just keep us out your mouths, people.
I know. At the end of the day, we're all Californians, right? We're all people from all over hate California, so we should just band together and just be one.
Now, you just attended a Raiders game at Allegiant Stadium in Vegas. Do you remember going to Raiders games, or were you a Raiders fan growing up in Oakland, or just football wasn't really a thing?
It wasn't a thing in our family. I always tell people, I use the hashtag growing up Ethiopian. So things were very different in our household. But we obviously, tried to integrate American culture into our household. So we were Raider fans, but we could not afford to go to Raider games at that time. So the television is as close as I got to the team.
I'm going to warn people, I'm about to sneeze. And I know you've had allergies this morning.
Oh, my goodness. Bless. God bless.
I leave it all in. The people got to know what really happens behind the scenes. It's fine. It's fine.
Keeping it real.
So we brought up already Cal State Northridge. Why Cal State Northridge? I mean, you grew up in Oakland, you lived in Bakersfield. How did you end up picking CSUN?
Well, I had researched journalism programs in California. I knew I wanted to kind of stay close to home, and CSUN just had great reviews about their journalism program. It was, for me, either, USC or CSUN. I would have still been in debt to this day if I would have went to USC. So CSUN seemed like the smarter option, and I have zero regrets. I can't say enough positive things about CSUN's journalism.
Now, I'm not going to hold you to this and be like, okay, now you said we prepared you or anything like that, but tell me about some things that have happened professionally, whether it was Bakersfield or, you spent a few years working at KTLA, also behind the scenes. Now you're in Vegas. You don't necessarily have to speak specifically to the program at Cal State Northridge, but what do you feel like college either prepared you for, or maybe was like, oh no, I didn't hear anything about this?
Oh, I have great examples of both. So what I loved about being at CSUN, it wasn't just the curriculum that professors, pushed, but it was internships. I did 4 internships while I was at CSUN, and I can't stress that enough to students, because it will either make you realize that you love what you're, studying to do, or that actually was not meant for you. So I interned at KTLA. That's how I got my foot in the door. I interned at TMZ. I had a job offer there as well. I minored in PR. I thought that might be something I could do and I was like, okay, this isn't really my thing. That internship taught me that. So I just love that. And it's just a like-minded individual. So I remember sitting in one of my journalism classes one day, and a classmate was like, hey, I'm about to wrap up my internship at TMZ, but they need more interns. Is anyone interested? And I'm like, hey, me, like,
yeah.
And it was literally that. I'm not gonna say that easy. I had to go through, the application and
jump through all the hoops. Same thing. When I was at the Sundial, the newspaper on campus, I overheard in the newsroom our editor-in-chief hang up the phone and say, oh, thank you for the offer. I really appreciate it. Take care. And I was like, oh, what's that about? What's going on? Oh, it was KNX. They have this weekend writer internship, and I'm just not interested. And I was like, I need that man's number. I need it now. Mm-hmm. And I called him, and I was in for an interview that next week, or maybe even that day, or whatever it was. And that helped shape my career from there, because the guy I worked for there ended up, it turns out that he and my first news director in Fresno came up together in LA, helping start news. It just, you just never know. You put yourself in positions to succeed and doors open.
Absolutely. And, I especially news outlets there in LA, CSUN, Matadors have a great reputation. And so I can't tell you, I mean, you just said you had Casey Montoya on, who's like KTLA superstar, and she's a Matador. And there were so many of us in that newsroom that I was taken aback. And my assignment manager at the time said, when I see CSUN on a resume, that's a good indication for, I'm usually going to call that person bad, because I haven't had any bad employees that have come from CSUN. So
how about the other side of things? What were some things that maybe kind of slapped you in the face a little bit professionally? Like, wow, I was not prepared for this at all.
I would have to say it's dealing with criticism, dealing with public criticism, dealing with angry viewers,
the trolls. Living in the comment section.
And how do you deal with trolls? I don't think maybe they're doing it now. And if not, I really hope that professors are integrating this into their curriculum. How do you deal with the trolls? We learned about packages, VOSOTs, and how to write and all that good stuff, how to gather elements, but no one ever told us that there would be all these other pressures that come along. And I don't know if that's something, I've talked to some veterans like Casey who say it didn't used to be like this. So maybe there was nothing to teach us at that time. I graduated in 2013, but that has been probably the one thing that I wish that we would have learned, how
have you dealt with it?
It's been tough. I mean, aside from, what I went through earlier this year, that was a whole other level of troll. But it doesn't matter. Back to before that, last year at the height of the pandemic, at the height of, all these social justice movements, I've been called some names I've never been called in my entire life. Obviously not to my face, but via, emails or messages or in the comments section. And I just think that these tough times have really brought out some of the ugly in people. And I didn't know that we doing what we love and being journalists and being passionate storytellers meant that we're also supposed to be punching bags. So I think that's the hard part, is that you have people that, I don't mind if you critique, what I look like or how I've done something. But when you're just upset about facts and you go to, calling us, these very race, and it doesn't even have to be racist half the time. There have been sexist, and it's just flat out disrespectful. That's been tough. And when you think about, I don't think sometimes viewers get that, like, we're humans, our job is part of our day, but we also have family who is sick from COVID. We also have family who've lost their jobs due to the pandemic, and we also are going through the same things. So attacking us is not fair.
I mean, you just got back from a birthday trip to, was it the Maldives?
Yes.
Right? And you came back, and one of your first newscasts, you still had your braids in from vacation. And now 10, 15, 20 years ago, and of course, farther back than that, would have never happened, because news directors were not supportive of people of color wearing their hair the way they wanted to wear their hair, the way that, they naturally felt like wearing their hair. And you still in 2021 got some comments about your hair. And like, really?
Yes, and again, if you don't like them, I'm okay with that. But I think, one particular comment, was, try to attack whether it was my hair was clean and my hygiene and it was just like, it's so unnecessary. And to be honest, it's baffling to think about what's going on in the world for someone to take the time out to do something like that. I still very much live in a world where if you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say anything at all. But that mentality seems to be dwindling away.
How is your family with the decision to go into TV news, to follow this path of yours? Did they always know? Did you always know that you wanted to do this?
Nope, not at all. Not at all. My parents and family are super supportive. Whatever I wanted to do, they backed me 100%. For me, getting into news became a dream of mine when my godparents were murdered. In 2009, my godparents were shot and killed walking to the corner store. We still don't know who murdered them. All detectives told us at that time was that they think they may have been mistaken for gang members because of the neighborhood that they lived in. It was 8 o'clock at night. They were, in black sweatsuits. It's January, it's cold, and that's it. And I think for our family, the hard part was local news channels not giving us a chance to ask the public for help in identifying who took away our loved ones. There's a reason that the show is called The First 48. You literally have, those first 48 hours after a murder are so crucial. And there's a very small window in which you have to pull at the heartstrings of someone that may have witnessed something. So, where they were killed was a very busy area. It's hard to believe that no one saw anything, but we just felt like our voices were muted, that we weren't given that opportunity to just tell our city just how we lost two incredibly amazing people. So for me, that was the beginning of wanting to give people a voice that don't have a voice. So that's where it started for me. And I think I've always just been I love people. I love telling stories. And so, I interned at TMZ first. Love TMZ in terms of they don't get enough credit for the investigative journalism they do. They're really good at what they do. For me, once I got to KTLA though, and I got to work in local news and tell stories that actually impact people's lives, that is where I knew I belonged. So I ended up turning the job down to TMZ to stay in news.
Yeah, there are some people who have this idea of like, okay, when I get into news, I'm going to try to change it from the inside, or I'm going to, and not just news, but I'm going to get into the machine and I'm going to change it from the inside. Did you ever feel like, now that you were there, okay, I'm doing assignments at KTLA, I'm working in Bakersfield, I'm working in Vegas. Did you ever feel like, wow, okay, this was not what I signed up for. I'm not really allowed to tell the stories that I want to tell and be a voice for those who don't have one?
You know what? I am so blessed in the fact that all three news organizations I've worked for have been so supportive of the stories that I want to tell. But again, did I, start off saying, hey, I'm here and this is what I want to do? Absolutely not. I had to earn their trust. I had to earn their trust in the fact that, I have great decision-making skills, and that I don't, even though I'm passionate, I'm not biased, and I will tell a story the way it should be told. And at the end of the day, I'm all about humanity and people. So it's not like I came in and as an African-American woman said, I only want to tell stories that impact my community. That's not who I am. I want to tell stories that make a difference. That's it. And with each day, I think I earned their trust. And that's why I tell journalism students all the time, have that passion, but please, you have to learn that you're going to have to earn that. You don't just get to go in. I did a lot of stories I did not want to do. And I did them with grace, and I did them with a big smile on my face until, and it's still like that. Is every story in my show a story that I want in there? Not necessarily, but you pick your battles.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. Before we get too far away from your godparents' murders, how did you handle that? How did you deal with that? Because like when my wife passed away last year in November, we kind of had a 10 or 11 month run where we could prepare. When she was first diagnosed in 2017, the survival rate of what she had, the breast cancer she had, was 3 to 5 years. And so it's like, okay, we've got 3 to 5 years, maybe more, hopefully more. but potentially 3. And that's what it turned out to be, was about 3 years.
Mm.
So even if you're not actively every day thinking, okay, I'm going to prepare for her to not be here, I'm going to prepare, you know, you're still, at least when it happens, you can say, well, at least we had this time.
Absolutely.
But when something like, something like a murder, and it's both godparents, so it's not as if you can, it's not as if you can lean on one because you've lost the other. They're both gone. Like, how did you handle that? How did you deal?
I don't think that I cried that night, at the hospital. And then it's crazy. I didn't cry at the funeral. I was pretty numb. And it took me about a good, I think, month maybe to have like a full-fledged breakdown about it. So it happens in increments. And it's different for everyone, right? Every angel anniversary I cry, with every year, because you're like, wow, first it was like, wow, a year, we still don't know, 2 years. And then you're like, wow, we're at 10 years. And so not having that closure has made it difficult to obviously deal with throughout the years. So I don't know that any one of us have ever just dealt with it. And then with every, any time we lose a loved one, it kind of opens that wound back up as well. So it's still hard. It still hurts, but I take that pain, and I think that's what sometimes sets me apart from other reporters, anchors, journalists, is that there's that human connection that I have with people. When I was, doing general assignment reporting in Bakersfield, believe it or not, lots of murders. And so It was a different approach when I would be out at a scene, family could tell that I was just as affected about their loss as they were. And so 9 chances to 1, it was me who they wanted to talk to, because they figured, you get it. I've never been that reporter that's shoving a microphone in the family's face, asking them how do they feel, because guess what? I know how that feels. So, if there was a murder or, a deadly shooting, stabbing in a sketchy part of town, I'm not scared to be there, because guess what? I know that it's important for me to be there to tell this story and hopefully get justice for this family. So you don't ever, it hurts. It still hurts. There'll be a movie that'll come on, and I'll remember football season is always hard because they were, diehard Cowboy fans and had fantasy football before it was even a thing. And so there's little parts of them that we remember, but they were amazing, and we just try to lean on each other and remember the good times, because we had tons of those. So
I want to ask, obviously you're an anchor now in Vegas, you're a reporter in Bakersfield. Not many people have taken the path you've taken, where you're going to start behind the scenes and then you're like, okay, I want to get in front of the camera now. It's usually, for a lot of people, not that easy, because you still have to do your job as, in your case, an assignment editor or whatnot. At what point did you say, you know what, I'm ready? I'm ready to be in front of the camera, and I'm ready to make that move? You had to leave LA.
Oh, it was a process. It was a process.
The look on your face.
Oh man, because in hindsight, I was ready. And so I remember having the talk. First of all, I can't say enough great things about KTLA. That place is so special, and not just that they have, in my opinion, some of the most talented reporters and anchors in LA, but just it's really a family. Like, I'm still really close friends with a lot of them, and I've been gone for 5 years now. They're like family. So early on, my news director at the time was Jason Ball, assistant news director was Chris Knutson, and they saw something that I didn't see, apparently, and, we're like, hey, have you thought about getting on the other side? And I'm like, well, yeah, kind of, but I'm really good at this, I've become a really great assignment editor, and it's you always want to do not necessarily what's easy, but what's comfortable, right?
I was going to say, you're good at what you do, you're comfortable doing it. You've set up this life After
My LA life
college?
was amazing. Okay. I was living the dream.
You're working in Hollywood? Yeah.
Working in Hollywood. So it was just, so it actually, I can tell you from that conversation, it was about 2 years before I left. And so there was a long time of me just doubting myself. I started off asking producers to send, like, help me become a better writer, because writing for print is very different than writing from broadcast. And when you're assignment editor, it's a lot of cop talk. My job is to gather the information and disseminate it to the newsroom. And then that's up to writers, producers, reporters to translate that however they fit, however they feel necessary. So, I did that at first, and I've always been great at public speaking. That's always kind of been my thing. I didn't think the transition to being in front of a camera would be that hard. Let me tell you, I sucked. It was so bad. And so what I would do is, like I said, because let me tell you, we did have some, whether they would be interns or, desk assistants that would come in and be there maybe a month. And immediately it's like, okay, I want to be a reporter. How can I get out in the field and shadow someone? I didn't do that. I, again, earned their trust, and, or they not only loved me as a colleague, but just as a friend. And so when the time came where it was like, hey, people like Casey, I shadowed Casey, on my days off. Yep. And that's the thing, you're giving up your free time. The dream, exactly. That's why it's like, you have to you really want it, because for me, it was looking at emails and seeing, okay, which reporters are working today, which photogs are working today, texting them, letting them know, hey, I want to get some stuff for my reel shot today. Can you let me know if you get to a good breaker, when you find out about it? And even then, now that I get it, they don't have time to think about me. So it's constantly refreshing emails like, okay, Casey's, yep, you know what? That's about 2-3 miles from here. I think I can make it. And really, I did that for a while, but a good friend of mine, Paul Sanchez, who's a photographer at KTLA, he believed in me too. And so there was times where I felt so defeated. I'm like, I'm terrible. I don't know what happens when that red light comes on. I just start tripping over my words. And it was like riding a bike. I just kept doing it. I kept doing it. I kept doing it. And eventually I had a reel put together. Then, because then no one told us that most jobs nowadays were for multimedia journalists, right? So here I am at KTLA. Yep. They don't have MMJs unless you talk about Chip Yost, their OC bureau chief. But other than that, everyone has a photographer. Yep. They have assignment editors who kind of do a lot of the work for them. And so when I found out that most entry-level reporter jobs were for MMJs, that was another, I had to learn Final Cut. I had to learn, I didn't learn Avid, I learned Final Cut. And oh my God, sorry, I've been up since 1 a.m.
Premiere Pro,
Thank you, Premiere. Yes. Jesus Christ, Premiere. And so, but Final Cut, that's my jam. That's my jam. And so, but again, it was getting in there, finding one of our photogs that knew Final Cut that was like, hey, all these jobs say I have to either know Final Cut or Premiere. I don't know it. Can you teach me? So did that. And then it was the reality of learning how much money reporters make their first market.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Was that an eye opener, And you're thinking, okay, wait, so I'm going to have to move to the middle of nowhere and make absolutely, if I'm lucky, half of what I'm making now.
I'm thinking Bakersfield, you were probably like 30,000, 31 or 2.
Yeah,
maybe.
barely. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, and me well, my faith is so strong, and it's because of reasons like this. Here I am thinking, I don't know how I'm going to survive making that little money. Do I really want to do this? Is it worth it? And then do I really want to move? I'd never lived outside of California. I don't know what the rest of the country looks like and how they do things there. But obviously you can't start in LA there, and not only that, but even working there, I would see reporters come in and not be as seasoned as, let's say, a Casey or, Kimberly Chang, will have at least put in that 5-7 years before coming to LA. And guess what? none of them are there anymore.
Yeah.
You know, when you make mistakes in the LA market, you end up on Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, you know, and that's what you don't, no one wants to end up on the late night shows. So I realized early on, okay, I'm gonna have to go make my mistakes somewhere else. I was fortunate enough that one of our former assignment editors was the assistant news director in Bakersfield at 23 ABC. And so I think he'd kind of been seeing on my social media, me getting my feet wet and putting my reel together. And he's like, hey, you know, we have a position open. How serious are you? I'm like, very, you know, being a hometown girl.
I was going to say, you get to move back home. Yeah.
Yeah, it made it that much better. But I'm not going to lie, I was afraid because, again, you're going to your first market to make those mistakes, right? Now I'm going to be making these mistakes in front of my hometown. And Bakersfield isn't that big. So I know almost everyone there. So it's like I almost would have rather been in the middle of nowhere where no one knew me making mistakes, as opposed to all my friends that I grew up with and family and, you know, teachers. So, but it was great. I mean, everyone embraced me, and it was just, but guess what? I messed up a lot in Bakersfield, you know? And so there, it's great because I think what keeps me so grounded is my very honest family, my very honest group of friends who had no problem, you know, calling me after every live shot saying, okay, why did you say that? You know, they had a watch party, my very first live shot, or going live for the first time. Friends and family had a watch party for me. So, you know, I get done. I thought I did great, you know, in my mind, I was like, nailed it. Yeah. You know, I get over, it was at my sister's. I get over there and I'm like, hey guys, so what'd you think? And I'm expecting to walk into like a room full of applause and great job, Feven. And it was like, girl, come sit down. Let's watch this together. And I was like, oh God.
Oh no. Oh no.
You know, and the first thing is, you know, I was trying to do the reporter voice, right? We all do that at first. Not all, most of us, I should say. And so, you know, and I'm watching and they're looking and they're staring at me like, who is that? We don't know that girl. That isn't Feven. Who is she? Why do you sound like that? That's not what, you know, I was like,
just
okay.
Roasted.
So that they quickly, you know, helped me realize that be yourself. That's not you. And so, but again, I did get to tell stories that impacted the community that I grew up in, that I love so much. Being my hometown, people trusted me and bringing their stories to me and knew that I would, you know, treat it with special care. So
that said, how difficult was it to leave for Vegas?
Oh man, oh, it was so hard. It was so hard. There were my parents' neighbors, amazing families in my parents' neighborhood, and you know, a lot of older couples, and you know, they would tell me, we get up and watch you every weekend morning, because I was a weekend morning anchor there. Right. And so I just remember the looks on their face when they're like, well, what are we supposed to watch now? And I'm like, keep watching 23 ABC. They do a great job, you know. I just won't be there. But, you know, a lot of people felt like I was abandoning ship, and how could you leave us? And you know, your hours. And as much as I would have loved to stay, it honestly just boils down to salary. You know, when you're in a market of that size, there's only so much that you can make. And while this is a passion, you know, I also have to survive, and I also have financial goals. And so then you also want to continue to challenge yourself, right? In each newsroom, you're learning new things. And I didn't think I'd learned everything I could learn there, but I wanted to learn more. And I wanted to be amongst people that have done more than I have. And in markets of that size, it's a starter market. So you're going to get a lot of first-time reporters, right? You know, kids straight out of college. And I want to learn every day. I'm never done growing. So, you know, it's hard. I try to get home as much as I can. But it was definitely hard to leave.
Compare your first month in Vegas to your first month in Bakersfield.
Ooh, you know, my first, I feel like I was a little more confident, right? I think when I came to Vegas. I, been doing this for a little bit. It wasn't like I was just going into it kind of blind. Obviously were different roles, different assignments, but I feel like I was a little more comfortable. I was nervous about whether I would be accepted here. I knew I had a little bit of an advantage in Bakersfield, being from Bakersfield. So if you didn't know who I was before and you learned that I was a Bakersfield girl, you'd probably like me, right?
Okay.
But in Vegas, I'm like, ugh, I don't know. Are they not going to like me? Because especially as an anchor, you have to have a likability factor for people to want to watch every day. So
is that before you go on, is that something that you had kind of experienced before where, wow, I hope they like me? I mean, you moved to Bakersfield at 10, so you're starting a new school. You've moved to Cal State Northridge, or you moved to LA to go to Cal State Northridge, so you're starting in a new area, and now in Vegas. So did you kind of, was it a new feeling, or was it a familiar feeling that you felt like, okay, I can get through this because I've done it before?
Well, yes, both. I mean, there's always that hesitancy, but because I'm a people person, I know once they get to know me, hopefully they'll give me a chance and they'll like me. But yeah, I think I've been a people pleaser by nature my entire life. I don't know why. And so there is a part of me that does want to, and I love people, so I want them to love me back. But I also say all that to say I have thick skin. I think what would bother the average, reporter or anchor, I kind of let roll off my sleeve. But yeah, everyone, it helps when you're working somewhere where they embraced me. I mean, I felt like part of the family from day one. And I kept telling my friends and family, like, I can't believe how nice everyone is. Everyone is so incredibly kind and warm and welcoming. And so, I mean, even the folks that live in Vegas, it's funny because I think I went in and I wanted to be a serious anchor, It's like, I have to be the serious anchor woman and I want them to take me seriously. I don't know if other women feel like this. I know for me, I'm always, you want to make sure that people understand that you're in that position because you earned it and not because of what you look like. So
interesting.
I think,
that's a conscious thought for you.
For sure. Because I've heard it before. I've heard, colleagues, once they get to know me and say, wow, I thought they just hired you because you're pretty, but you're actually smart. And it's like, thanks. Which is,
I don't know how to respond to that.
And so there's a part of me that I think is always very self-conscious about not wanting to be maybe too perky and not wanting to be too, because I don't want that to be misconstrued as me being just a bubbly airhead. And I'll be quite honest. So when I first got there, I was like, okay, you have to be, make sure that they understand that you're here because you are a journalist.
Show them your credentials and not just be yourself.
Exactly.
Right.
And so, but my co-anchor, Dave Hall, who is just a godsend, he's like my brother from another mother. I think that was like the first time I kind of maybe said something funny. And during the break, he goes, wait a minute, you're funny. And I was like, don't tell anyone, like, let's not go there. And he goes, no, like, I don't think you understand. Like, our viewers are different. Like, this is the Feven that they're going to like, not that other one that you're putting on, And so he just really kind of nurtured that, the silly side of me and would just say things to kind of bring it out of me. And before you know it, it was like, oh, okay, this is okay. I guess I can do both. So it's really just finding a way to be comfortable. And in my case, I mean, I have friends that have had god awful co-anchors and haven't been as lucky as I've been. So I just really got lucky to land at a station where I'm working with people who are like me.
Now, I grew up in LA, so I went to Vegas all the time. Dozens and dozens and dozens of times. Did you go there too? And then all of a sudden, okay. So, because I just didn't want to assume that, you're from California, so you must have been going to Vegas all the time when it was, weekends or summers or whatever. So now that that's been established, now you're living in Vegas. How how long did it take for you to kind of turn off, or maybe just never really did, that idea of, this is not the Vegas I would go to on the weekends to party with my girls and then come back Sunday night for an 8 o'clock class Monday morning. This is where I live now.
Oh yeah.
How, and what was that transition like?
Within like a month or two, max maybe 3. And, I think it's once you get tired of going to the Strip, right? Like at first you're like, when you're visiting, and I have family who live here. I had a couple of friends who lived here. And I remember when I would come to town and they were like, oh, well, do you want to come to my house? Because I don't really want to come to the Strip. And I'm like,
Right.
Who doesn't want to come to the Las Vegas Strip? Like, are you nuts? But now that I live here, I get it. It is not as exciting when you're a local. This is our backyard essentially. So
it's like when you worked at KTLA, you're driving into Hollywood all the time. The luster is gone.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And so, the crowd, right? You don't want to deal with the crowds. I live in Henderson and I love Henderson. Henderson is a great community. A lot of, it's family oriented, but the fantastic part is at 15 minutes, I'm on the Strip. So I kind of have the best of both worlds, but yeah, it only took, and I know people from all over the country. And so naturally, I get messages all day, every day from people saying, hey, either I'll be there tomorrow, or I'm in town, or I'll be there next week, or sometimes it's like 2 months from now. Yeah. So I had to set boundaries. I had to set boundaries. It started as like, okay, maybe every other weekend I'm willing to come down to the Strip. And if someone happens to visit on a weekend that is my no Strip weekend, maybe you can come to Henderson for coffee, but you have to have some
Maybe
structure.
I'll let you. Maybe I'll let you come to Henderson for coffee.
Because it just becomes too much. But you get it. The one thing I will say now is it's nice sometimes, because I think when I do go down to the Strip, there's more tourists than locals. So I can kind of like enjoy myself without having to take too many pictures with people, which I don't mind. But there are days where you just like, I just want to be Feven, not Feven.
Yeah. I just want to be Feven. Now you brought up earlier this year, had some issues, you found, in your car, it was like some early morning or something like that. And again, you can go into as much detail as you'd like, but I'm more interested in how you handled it all, how personally and professionally, because, that's one of the things as people in the media, it's one of the things that we kind of always have in the back of our minds, like, okay, don't become the news, don't become the news, don't become the news. And then all of a sudden, shit.
Yeah.
I'm the news.
Oh man, not only news, but like world news, like viral news, which honestly was not, it was in the back of my mind, but never in a million years could I have ever imagined that it would get as much attention as it did. Obviously the headlines are there, and I was arrested for DUI. I was in a parked car, asleep, but Nevada rules state if the car is on, the ignition, the keys are in the car. I have a push to start, so they weren't in the ignition, but and I was in a neighborhood and thought that nothing was wrong with that. And there were other factors for legal reasons that I won't get into. But yeah, it's hard to experience the most embarrassing moment of your life in the public's eye, right? Most people are allowed to make their mistakes in private. That's something they should have taught us too in journalism school, that they did not.
Okay. So, by the way, I'm making notes here about the trolls and the mistakes.
And the mistakes.
I will be talking with my students about that just next week. Yes. Absolutely.
You don't realize that you are held to a higher standard. I am pretty down, or like I forget sometimes that I am an anchor. I'll be honest, and I'll be at the grocery store and someone's like, hey, I know you. And I'm like, from where? And it's like, I watch, it's like, oh yeah, because at the forefront of my
You don't
mind
walk
every
around
day.
with this t-shirt like, ask me about my morning newscast.
No,
Right.
not at all. So I didn't realize that's part of the job, right? And so obviously, first, people I talk to are my bosses, and I am just very lucky and very thankful that both, my news director, general manager, assistant news director, I mean, they were incredible and they understood what happened. I was very honest from the beginning about what happened and very forthcoming and very transparent. And for them, I think what they said was, Feven, you are a good person, and we know that you are a good person, and people make mistakes. So we aren't like, termination was never a conversation. Me losing my job was never a conversation. And for that, I was so thankful, because it easily could have been, right? But for them, it was like, no, like, we're behind you 100%. Obviously, we are in the business of being transparent. So this isn't something that we can just kind of sweep under the rug.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
That's interesting. Like, by the way, yeah, we're on the same page, but we've also got to talk about this.
Yes.
Publicly. Yeah.
And that was hard, right? Because I think we had conversations where it was like, if this was the mayor, we would report it. And I was like,
yes.
But I'm not the mayor. I'm an anchor. Like, what do you mean? Like, how? I don't, so I'm not going to lie. At first, it was really hard for me to wrap my mind around, okay, I don't mind the people that need to know knowing, but Las Vegas knowing, it was some very dark days for me, because so much I've been a people pleaser,
yeah.
right? And you want to be liked, and you don't want one mistake to define your entire career. And so that was hard to wrap my mind around. But there were, legal, some legalities that we had to work around. So for me, it was like, okay, let me get through that. And then we'll figure the rest out. So what people I don't think understand is, I was at home for a month before it even hit before it made headlines, before I went back to work. And so I'm super thankful that my station allowed me that time to kind of deal with such a personal manner privately. So when I did go back to work, and I did make the video and make the statement, because let's be clear, for that entire month, our newsroom phones didn't stop ringing from what I was told. And it was like, where's Feven? Where's Feven? Where's Feven? A lot of my colleagues had no idea what was going on. So it would have been weird to just pop back up like nothing ever happened. And I understand that they wanted our viewers to know that you can trust Fox 5 as well, that we're not tabloid, right? We're not going to air everyone else's dirty laundry and kind of sweep ours under the rug. And so it was hard, but I will say that had we not gone about it that way, I would be waking up every morning worried, is someone going to find, did someone know today, is someone going to know,
Right.
And so
you get out in front of it.
And we aired that video at least like 3-4 times in one day. So it was like every demo, all of our viewers from morning, day, night, everyone saw it. And
you're like, great, everyone gets to see it.
Everyone gets to see this. I think people understood, I was just sincere about, my apology was sincere, and I made I'm human. And would I have done things differently? Absolutely. But you can't change things, right? You can't change time. And my faith has taught me that everything happens for a reason. I'm still having conversations with God to figure out why that happened, because I still don't know. Eventually I will figure it out, right? He'll make it clear to me. But initially, I'll tell you, the reaction, I was so surprised. It was, I maybe got 2 angry tweets, but the messages and the emails of support were overwhelming. I couldn't believe it. I cried. I was just so like, and they were happy tears that like, oh, wow, people don't hate me because I've lost a friend to drunk driving. And so, even having that conversation with my circle of friends, or, with my friend's then girlfriend who still doesn't sleep well at night about it, that was hard because, here we are. It's like, it was hard. But people being as supportive as they were helped tremendously. I have such an amazing support system, whether it's from at work or at home with my family. It wasn't until the following week, so I think I it aired on a Friday. I was back at work Monday. So, Monday was great. Tuesday was great. I think Wednesday is when or was it Thursday? It was either that Wednesday or Thursday. The our local newspaper, or no, I think first it was like FTV Live, right? Because I remember a lot of what management cared about was like, because if once FTV Live finds out, or once the RJ finds out, which is our local newspaper here in Vegas, it's over. And so, once they published the stories, it was like, oh man, oh God, this is like making like real headlines. That's not good.
Yeah. That's when it really picked up speed.
And then I started getting calls and texts from family and friends in Bakersfield. Never did I think that it would get to Bakersfield, right? I'm like, I was so worried about Vegas. Girl. And it was like you did. And then it was like I started getting these.
It gets to Bakersfield. It's going to get to Berlin. It's going to get to Ethiopia.
I'm from Germany, and it wasn't until the New York Post picked it up. I think it was that Thursday. And it was like, that is when I felt like I couldn't breathe.
Don't worry about Bakersfield.
And you got to think both times, both days, these articles came out while I was live on air during my show.
No.
So finding out while also having to keep your composure while your phone is going nuts from notifications, because now you have, whether it's people sending it to you, like you don't know, like, hey, did you see this? Yep, that's me. Saw it.
Did you see this?
I was there. Yeah,
People.
Okay, so
how did it make you feel? Right, yeah. At that point, right.
But what people didn't understand, so it was Wednesday. So the RJ and FTV Live published their articles Wednesday. Wednesday, after I got off that afternoon, I found out that my nephew had been murdered. He had been shot and killed. Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, I can't talk about that. That's too fresh for me not to cry. But, so in hindsight, to be honest, I had more important things to deal with. So it was a lot, trying to keep family from not losing it. And I'm kind of like the anchor in my family. Everyone calls me to keep them like sane and figure things out and calm them down. So I don't know if I definitely had a distraction, but that all of a sudden became secondary. At the end of the day, I didn't hurt anyone. I'm not hurt, and I still have my job. So that was done. All these, all these articles, because after that, it was like, you name it, every blog, vlog, anyone you can think of published a story. That I just had to really compartmentalize, what I was going to deal with hour by hour. And at that, I'm such a family oriented person. For me, family comes first. So nothing else really mattered at that time other than us getting through another nightmare. And obviously that's something, I didn't feel the need to publicize because there was already enough out there. But yeah, so what people don't get is I was going through so much at one time that I really didn't know whether I was coming or going. It was, for me, the daily task was wake up, right? Get dressed, get through the day, just get through work, get through the shows, keep a straight face. And if you got to break down, you have all day to do it when you get off work. So.
And did you break down?
Yeah, for sure.
Did you let yourself do that? Because that's one of the big things. Like you mentioned, you're your family's rock. You're your family's anchor. There are so many people in your position who go through stuff, you know, far worse than what you've gone through, and they don't let themselves deal with it. They don't let themselves grieve. They don't let themselves, you know, cry it out. But it sounds like you reached the point.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, you have to get it out, or else it's just going to eat you up. I mean, did I do it every day? No. You know, my phone would ring so much, whether people were calling about our loss, or people were calling or texting or emailing about my situation. It just was nonstop. And, you know, at the time, we're just trying to keep people sane, like I said. So that was a distraction for me. But my faith, I honestly, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, it sounds like such a cliche, but it's not. For me, it's that understanding that I have had a really great life and I have been so blessed. And I guess, you know, life isn't perfect. And this was showing me that. But am I going to abandon my faith? No. Not everything lasts forever, you know? And I just knew that if I wasn't strong, it was going to just stress out my family completely. And I needed to at least let them know that I'm okay.
Yeah.
And like I said, for every, you know, nasty, you know, email or nasty message that I got from someone, I would get 50 just incredibly supportive, you know. And I mean, these are people from not just forget just Las Vegas, forget Nevada, the world. I mean,
Right.
from all over. People were sending me articles in languages I've never even heard of, you know. And I'm like, I don't understand. You know, I think what was really, I think, a moment for me is when my niece, I went back and forth about, you know, my nieces and nephews look up to me so much, and I wanted to stay in that light that they have me in, right? So when their parents are like, so, you know, are you going to have the talk? You know, and I'm like, no, I'm not ready. I don't know I don't know what to say.
Right.
And, you know, they call my niece first and she goes, Amy, did you know you're on Snapchat? And I was like, oh yeah, I have a Snapchat. And she goes, no, you're on the cover of the Snapchat subscriptions, your mugshot. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, no.
Huh. And she goes, I'll send you the screenshot. And I'm like, oh, you know. And I mean, it was there for like 3 or 4 days. And so every kid in my life sent me this screenshot. Like,
No.
look at, and I'm just like, wow, you know. But again, you see my personality. I have a family with a very colorful sense of humor. So, you know, the kids at one point, they were like, do you think it would be okay if we got t-shirts with your mugshot? I was like, I will kill you myself. No, you cannot do that, you know? So
let me ask you about that, because I mean, we've got this little moment of levity here with the mugshot. How do you feel about that mugshot?
I you know, I don't know. It's
as
like,
far as mugshots go, it's not bad.
No, that's yeah. You know, when I was spent that time in jail, it's still hard for me to process actually saying that. You know, I remember when the officer, after I, you know, took the picture, was like, oh my God, what do you do? And I was like,
no.
I'm a news anchor. She goes, huh? And I was like, you know, because it's like, God, I don't want everyone here to know. And she goes, oh, I get, oh God, yeah, this is bad. This is really bad then. And I was like, you don't say.
You surprised it didn't get out? Are you surprised I mean, it didn't get out. It didn't really go viral until after you guys started airing the apology. Yeah.
Yes.
Are you surprised?
I was, because you think, I mean, we work so closely with, you know, law enforcement here. There wasn't she did, and you got to think, we had masks at that time, and obviously I didn't look like I looked coming out of a show. So I was hoping no one recognized me, but a lot of the officers did. But I will say that they were so gracious, so kind. You know, I had so many people like, you know, screw Metro, I can't believe that. And I'm like, no. I have nothing negative to say about any of the officers, because and they did their job. You know, and that's that. But in terms of I didn't get special treatment by any, but they understood who I was, and they were very cautious and to like not yell my name out, and, try to give me words of comfort, like, hey, because I couldn't stop crying. I mean, I'll be honest, I was just tears, it's like, don't cry. Like, it's not the worst. Like, we've seen worse, or I watch you every morning and I love you. Like, I'm still going to watch you every day. So in terms of, how I feel about, I had nothing negative to say, but saying all that, I was like, there's too many of them that notice me. Like, it's just a matter of time. And so when, that day, the next day, and then like a week went by, and I'm like, whoa, like still, and so between my attorneys, they were like, look, if it's not out yet, we don't think it will. And so, like you said, I mean, it wasn't until I made the announcement myself that it was out there. So I was kind of surprised. My bosses were really surprised, and they were also told me that they were very impressed with how I handled things. You know me, I'm a social butterfly. So I literally sat in my place for a month, and other than like absolute necessary appointments, did not go anywhere. I did not post to social media. I was just very secluded until I worked things out, and very transparent with my bosses, and communicated every single, and what I said was going to happen is what happened. If I said, we're expecting this by this date, it happened by that date. Was it hard? Yeah, because every day, you're having to talk to, 3, 4, 5 different people that literally have your life in their hands and your career in their hands. And so it was nerve-wracking. I think I hear so many people like, oh, you're so strong. And I'm like, honey, that's what you see, but I definitely had a lot of weak, moments where you're just like, very dark days where you don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to talk to anyone. You don't even have the energy to lift your head off the pillow, because you're just like, how did I get here? How did I mess up like such an incredible life and opportunity that I've been blessed with? I think, I'm just grateful that I've not been defined by that one moment. That I think, and it's quite shocking that people, everyone kept telling me like, Feven, don't worry, a couple years from now, no one's going to remember this. No one's going to be talking about this. And what this happened mid-March. I got back to work at the end of April. So let's just say it's been May, June, July, 5, 6 months. I mean, every blue moon, someone send me a message about it, but it's like people have moved on, and I am quite shocked at how quickly people have moved on.
In the few minutes we have left here, tell me about your conversations with God, how they've evolved over the years.
Over the years, I think, first it's obviously what, your parents teach you, right? And and then it's really having those conversations with God. But it's funny because I tell people, he's really like my best friend. Like in my mind, like we have this relationship, and I don't see him. I don't feel him physically, right? But like he exists, and he is my friend. So when I go into these conversations, it's a conversation like this. I use my words wisely, obviously, but I don't want to say the wrong thing. Don't want to say bad words talking to the big G up above. But it's like this, and I'm very honest. I'll honestly tell you, I always knew he was there, right? And I always knew what I'm supposed to do as a good Christian. It wasn't until I was at CSUN. At that time, I was living very poorly, or poor, should I say. It was like, my first year at CSUN, I only ate off the Burger King dollar menu. And I remember when I decided to go back to school and have this dream, how was I going to afford it? How was I going to not work and do this and commute? Because that first year I would commute 3 days a week from Bakersfield to Northridge. And so I had this big, water, the 5-gallon Arrowhead. And so it was like I had that change bucket, literally. And that was my gas money. And so my gas money and my food money. And so that is how I literally only had enough money to do those things. I could have had help, but I've always been very prideful and I didn't want anyone to know how hard this was. And my parents are, especially my mom is a realist. So for her, she's like, you could be working doing this. And so I was like, I'm going to do it. So spring semester, Dr. DeVoe, Marcy DeVoe, I had her as a professor and she told us about a scholarship, and it was the Flip Wilson Scholarship. And it was at that time with $23,000. And she said, no one applied, I think the previous year, like even if one of you apply, you're going to get it. that's $23,000. But you have to write a 3,000-word essay on Flip Wilson and his contribution to, in particular, media and Black television. I didn't know who Flip Wilson was. Never heard of him, and it was during finals. Okay. So it's like, oh my God, I have to study. I have papers and how am I going to get this? But something said, Feven, just try it. You never know.
Yeah.
This is it. So I want to say she told us about this on a Thursday. It's due Friday at 4 p.m. I commute to Bakersfield. So I had to go home, brushed up on the history of Flip Wilson. And I knocked out this paper. I didn't go to sleep. I did not sleep and had to drive it back, physically hand it in by 4 p.m. I made it at 3:55 and I did not listen to music the entire drive from Bakersfield to Northridge. I prayed the whole time, like, God, I know I'm pushing it, but please, I really need this. I really need this. And I won. And I think for me, it was just the circumstances that I was like, wow, he's gonna make a way. Like, I just have to do my part. And so I think that was it. When I just went through what I went through with my situation, and at the same time, losing my nephew, and we have another murder, same case, his murderers are still out there somewhere. And so I kid you not, around this time, at least for like a week or two, it seemed like every day I woke up and it was just negativity. It was just like bad. It's like, and I would wake up and I was so mad at God. I'm like, what have I done to you? Like, I do what I'm supposed to. What are you doing here? And I'm like, you're not my friend anymore. So you don't want to be my best friend anymore. You're just going to abandon me. And so I went through at least like a 3-4 day period where I was very upset. And I knew who he was. And it's not like I abandoned him and didn't think he existed, but I just thought, what is the problem here? I'm a good person. And you think that you're a good person and nothing bad should happen, but that's not the case. And so, with each lesson and whatever happens in life, even through the bad times, eventually it makes you stronger. I think for me, what that situation taught me is, my God, you can really get through anything. And hopefully what I've been through will, someone listening to this will learn, will get that you can go through hell and back, but you'll get through it. You'll get through it. And hopefully your pain will help somebody else get through theirs. Ginger Z's book got me through some of my darkest days. And if you haven't read it, I suggest you read it. One of my co-anchors, Alyssa, suggested I read it. And, it's called Natural Disasters. I cover them, and I am one, and I cover them, or something like that.
Yeah.
But, it was a side to Ginger Z. You wouldn't have paid me to think that, she suffered from depression, substance abuse, anorexia. And it was just all these layers. And because I'm like, I idolize Ginger Z. I know she's a meteorologist, but she's just so damn good at what she does. And so natural. I would have never thought that. So I think reading her book helped me realize, like, look, we all go through things in life, right? And unfortunately, being a good person, praying every day and being a Christian and a God-fearing person does not mean that life is going to be perfect for you. All you can do is just hope that you are mentally and emotionally prepared to deal with it all. And so
you could have
cry. We laugh typically when me and you get together and talk.
I know, but you got me. You got me.
So you get it, you've been through, a lot. And, you know, it hurts my heart when I see what you and your family went through. Because again, you're like, people like you don't deserve this. But unfortunately, that is just not how life works. And the only thing we can pray for is that, you know, God put us through it to help somebody else get through theirs.
You could have, before this interview, said, hey, by the way, I'm not talking about anything that happened this year. You could have said, yeah, I'll mention it, but only like 2 minutes. All you said was, okay, let's go.
Mhm.
And I appreciate your transparency and your vulnerability and your strength. And I just appreciate you. Thank you, Feven.
Thank you.
Appreciate
And
it.
I appreciate you when you have, I'm lucky to know people like you that I trust. So I knew that, you know, if anything, this would prayerfully be a teachable moment for others, but to know that, hey, being a journalist doesn't just mean that you are turning packages and being a storyteller. There's a big responsibility that comes with that, and one that I get now, one that I understand what's ahead of me. And, you know, like my boss said, you know, this isn't baseball, Feven. It's not 3 strikes, you're out. You know, he gave you one chance.
Yeah.
That's it. So, you know, my goal is to make sure that, you know, other people understand that, you know, just be careful.
Well, and also understanding that, yes, there is power in telling other stories,
Mhm.
but I believe that there is so much more power in telling our own and sharing our own.
Absolutely.
And so I appreciate you sharing yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Aron. And as always, you and the family are in my prayers.
Thanks for watching the Aron Bender podcast, whether it's on YouTube, IGTV, or DB&A TV. If you have guest ideas or comments, email me, aronbendermedia@gmail.com, or find me online, aronbender.com. Be well, and thanks for watching.